This morning begins this series on the topic of shalom. Pastor Fred will be discussing various aspects of shalom, including how we can welcome more peace into our lives, spiritually, physically, emotionally, mentally, relationally, financially, and vocationally. This morning, we envision the future through the lens of shalom. In Proverbs 29:18, we find these words: "When people do not accept divine guidance, they run wild, but whoever obeys the law is joyful." That's the New Living Translation. Some of you will be more familiar with the King James Version, which is, "Where there is no vision, the people perish, but he that keepeth the law, happy is he." I see a lot of happy people here this morning. So I'm making an inference there that a lot of you care about God's will, and that's part of the reason you're here this morning. We have a spiritual need to worship God, and then we're blessed in doing it with one another. Vision. What is the overarching vision of the church? Well, there's many ways to express it. One of the ways that I like is that we are called as a church to love as Jesus loved. And Jesus embraced and shared shalom everywhere he went. And so we are called to do likewise. We live in a world with an enormous amount of conflict. We see it in the news every single day. If you're a little bit like me, you have this dynamic tension in your life. You want to be an informed citizen, and you don't want to know what's going on out there in the world. There are days when, by about the middle of the afternoon, I recognize within myself that I'm depressed, and I wonder why, and then I've been reading the news, and I've been listening to it, and there's a good reason to be depressed, and so it is that we have to find some spiritual practices that help us embrace the good news of God's love and live into that, and spend a little bit more time focused on that. What do we do with the conflict and stress and division and chaos? Well, we can't avoid it. We can try to, but we can't really avoid it. We can try to pretend it's not there, but that doesn't work very well. Or we can just remind ourselves of what's important to God and how we can live into that. Embracing, understanding, and love, and unity, and shalom. What is your plan for 2024? And more importantly, what is God's plan for you? Now, I have noticed, and I'm sure you have, that pain comes to us in different forms. It can come to us physically. For me, I'm one of these people who walks around in the world with a little bit of back pain most of the time. And that started in high school. And I'm so used to it, I don't really think about it much. And I have some help, and I'm doing some things to try to support the core and have the core support the rest of me. And it's not debilitating, and it's just, occasionally irritating. Well, we can try to get rid of the pain, or we can ask ourselves, is it telling us something that we need to do a little differently in our lives? Do we need to adjust things slightly? And what might that look like? Well, it may be some of both. I'm not sure. I think that happens to us emotionally, and it happens to us spiritually, and it happens to us in every aspect of life. When I am discomforted spiritually, and then if I can become spiritually aware, which is sometimes hard to do in those moments, then I can say, God, thanks for the discomfort. You're trying to tell me something. I just need to take a moment and listen. I guess what I'm saying is I'm inviting you in this new year to take a second when discomfort comes your direction in whatever form and say, what might I learn from this? How might this be a blessing in my life? How might it make a difference for me, but also for others? Because the people who are the greatest blessing to us are the ones who have compassion. They have understanding. And we can be about that as well. We live in a quick fix culture, and we're all the beneficiaries of that. Things come quickly, they're easy. That's kind of nice. I've gotten used to it. I suspect you have too. But that doesn't always work real well, especially when it comes to spiritual formation. We can't automatically grab a hold of shalom and make it our own. It doesn't work that way. It's a gift from God. And we have to nourish it on a daily basis. God will point the direction, and then we have to take a step of faith. We often equate shalom with tranquility. And I don't know about you, but I really like tranquility. The problem is that tranquility is not shalom. It's nice. I embrace it anytime it comes my direction. But it's not what God is talking about and what Jesus is living when it comes to shalom. After all we have to do is take a look at Jesus' life and his teaching, and what do we see? We see a man who loved God, loved his neighbor, and loved himself, and loved his enemy. And shalom worked through him in all that he did. But there was an enormous amount of conflict that came his direction. People who wanted to destroy love, people who wanted to respond to love with hate, people who, well, the list can go on and on. We all experience all of this in our lives. Rabbi David Zaslow talks about the deeper meaning of shalom. Contrary to popular opinion, the Hebrew word shalom does not mean peace, at least not in the English sense of the word. It comes from a Hebrew root word that means wholeness. And what is wholeness? In the Hebraic way of thinking, wholeness is the joining together of opposites. Let me say that again. The joining together of opposites. That's why we say shalom when we greet friends, and when we wish them farewell, we also say shalom. In the most opposite of situations, coming and going, it's the same word, shalom. I love his definition. It goes deeper than we sometimes think about it. It helps us get a sense that when tension comes our way, God can speak to us through it. We can embrace it. We can listen. We can try to understand the other. I have a friend, and we love to discuss everything, and we disagree on quite a bit. Now, we have a few things in common, which helps, but the thing that keeps us together is our love for each other, our relationship. Excuse me a second. It's that love for one another that makes it possible for us to discuss all kinds of things. And I love it when he offers us a perspective that's different than mine. Why? It enlarges and deepens my understanding. And I'm interested in that. And I think Jesus is interested in that. And I think the church is interested in that. The word dialogue comes from the Greek dia and logos, meaning across words or across reason or speech that goes back and forth. Don't you love that? Dialogue, speech going back and forth, back and forth. I love to be persuaded to think differently than I have before, because that's always required for spiritual growth. Well, growth of any kind, actually. And I'm not a person who persuades others very much. Are you one of those? I have ideas, I have convictions, I have thoughts, but, well, I don't know why I went there. You can avoid that. Not sure where that was going, but yeah, we'll just let that one go. A colleague of the rabbi asked this question: do you know why there is no peace in the world? Because the world is into force. First, they force war on each other. Now they want to force peace upon each other, but it doesn't work. Peace by force isn't peace. Peace is the most non-force in the world. I love that. I've thought about that in the past. There have been moments in my life when I wanted to force love upon people with a sledgehammer. It doesn't work that way. And instead, Jesus talks about, and we're given and offered, the fruit of the Spirit: joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness. Who needs that in their lives? I do. You do. We all do. In Hebrews chapter 10, we find these words: let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. And let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. That is an aspect of what these small groups will be about, is encouraging each other in love and good works. And of course, it's also what happens in worship and before and after worship whenever the church gathers. In the ongoing life of the church, God sometimes calls you to be the one who encourages another. And sometimes God chooses somebody else to encourage you. I suspect most of the time both are happening simultaneously. Is there ever a day that comes when we don't need a little bit of encouragement, especially if we're paying attention to what's going on in the world around us? The best ability is availability. The best ability is availability. You can have all the wonderful skills and abilities in the universe, but if you're not available to God's purposes, of what possible value could it be? Now, some of us including those of us who've been around the church for a long time. For me, it was since the day I was born. I still have moments, I know this will surprise you, when I think, God, how on earth can you possibly use me? I don't know much. Everyone I talk to knows more than I do. I'm frustrated almost every day with technology. When my daughter and I went to Verizon to get my first cell phone, she was at college, and I got in my car and headed home, and 3 blocks later, my phone rang, and I didn't know how to answer it. I kept pushing. And I returned to campus, and by the grace of God, I found her. I guess I could have asked any student, they would have, what's this crazy guy doing here? And she said, Dad, you slide it. You slide it. Well, aren't we all dependent on each other in a variety of ways? Sometimes we don't like to acknowledge that, but isn't that the case? And aren't we blessed by that? So our abilities become skills and contributions over time. They don't happen instantly. So if God is calling you to help lead a small group, then you will have the help and support you need. And if it's your first experience of doing so, well, there's going to be a first. I mean, that's how it is. But if the church is, well, let me rephrase that. As I have gotten to know this congregation, you'll be showing up to a small group of people who are loving and caring and supporting you. And you'll be excited about the faith and about what God is doing in your life and about how Shalom can be more a part of your life. At Christmas, we celebrate God coming to earth, becoming available, being made manifest through Jesus. In Luke chapter 1, and then a verse in chapter 2, listen to these words. Because of God's tender mercy, the morning light from heaven is about to break upon us, to give light to those who sit in darkness and in the shadow of death, and to guide us to the path of peace. Glory to God in the highest heaven, and peace on earth to those with whom God is pleased. We have free will. We can opt out if we want to. We can ignore. We can embrace the easy way of selfishness and retribution and jealousy. We can get caught up in cycles of addiction and the destruction which inevitably flows and follows. Or we can focus on Jesus, and we can get the help we need, and we can go to God in prayer. And we can welcome when God irritates us. Have you noticed that? We come to church most of the time because we want some comfort. That's legitimate. But sometimes we arrive here and God just irritates the hell out of us. Can we say hell in church? I guess I did. Because isn't that what love does? It pokes us, it prods us, it irritates us. But would we have it any other way? I wouldn't. In Proverbs 4, verse 8, we find these words. Well, maybe we find these words. Okay, well, I told my family that I might crash and burn this morning, and I probably shouldn't have said that out loud. Okay, well, look up Philippians 4, verse 8, and you will find what to focus on. It's a beautiful list, and it includes to focus on what is true and what is honorable and what is right, and a few other things that are worthy of your focus and time and mine as well. These remind us, the scriptures remind us where to place most of our focus and to keep at bay the distractions that would pull us away from what is most important. And when we focus on God and on Jesus and on the scriptures, then gratitude comes our direction. And when gratitude grows, then we're empowered to live into that life that Jesus is calling us all. How will you make yourself available to God and the church in 2024? How will God's shalom be made manifest in all aspects of your life and mine? Spiritual, physical, emotional, mental, relational, financial, and vocational. In case you're wondering about that list, it's coming to you in small groups shortly. Answering these questions will require that we have sufficient courage to show up. I think you're courageous to be here this morning because you showed up for each other and for God. And when you show up for God, change might be required. Have you noticed that? You might have to add something to your life. You might have to subtract something from your life. You're probably going to have to do both. But I wouldn't have it any other way. As I close out the message, I'd like to invite Darren and his daughter to come up and prepare for another song that will be a blessing to us all. And I wanted to share this poem that comes from Howard Washington Thurman, who was an American author and philosopher, theologian, mystic, educator, and civil rights leader. He was born in 1899 and passed away in 1981. And this is entitled, "The Mood of Christmas." When the song of the angels is stilled, when the star in the sky is gone, when the kings and princes are home, when the shepherds are back with their flock, the work of Christmas begins. To find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to rebuild the nations, to bring peace among people, to make music in the heart.